Before leaving, Iruki wishes our boy luck and warns him that his class is full of stubborn people. Nade asks if he plans to stay for the lesson. He simply replies that he doesn't like it. This response surprises him, who quietly questions his lack of interest in magic class. Finally, he apologizes for Iruki's behavior while explaining that although he may seem difficult at first, he is not a bad person once people get to know him. Our dude responds by considering him special. One of the boys, however, dismisses the idea of trying to understand him while saying that it would only be a waste of effort. He describes Iruki as a genius, though more on the eccentric side. Curious, Shirone asks if Iruki is really a genius. Just then, the boys notice Iruki once again and point out that he appears to be lost in his thoughts. They joke about whether he will take off his clothes. Confused, our boy asks if that has actually happened. Instead of answering, one of them simply urges him to move along. Suddenly, a series of explosions occur while shocking everyone nearby. Observing the scene, Shirone quickly realizes that Iruki is manipulating a Shizmed spirit zone. The others, still in awe, remark that no matter how many times they witness it, it remains impressive. They believe that no one else in the entire kingdom is capable of doing what Iruki does. Soon after, they spot a group of targets in the distance, where a professor is teaching class 4. Some students call out to Iruki while asking him to stop, but he simply responds to detonate while forcing everyone to duck for cover. One of the boys calls him a madman. After a short while, Iruki casually bids farewell to our boy before leaving. At that moment, Professor Romi angrily shouts at Iruki, while reminding him that he has just returned from suspension and is already causing trouble again. He defends himself by insisting that he hasn't broken anything. However, she remains firm while announcing that he has just earned 3 more days of suspension. Shocked, he complains that her punishment seems too harsh. Meanwhile, Shirone is deep in thought while trying to process what he just witnessed. He considers the nature of the Shizmed spirit zone while noting its connection to detonation techniques. He can't help but wonder who Iruki really is. One of the boys then remarks that Iruki is probably the biggest oddball in class 5. Despite having no friends and only average grades, he is still considered a genius. Explaining further, he describes Iruki as a textbook example of a biased thinker and someone who excels in one area while struggling in others. Apparently, he scores full marks in every subject he actually cares about. Furthermore, Nade brings up savant syndrome, a phenomenon where individuals with certain cognitive differences exhibit extraordinary skills in a specific field. In Iruki's case, his talent lies in computational physics. He is so advanced in this area that he can calculate conditions that only exist at absolute 0 or 100 million degrees. Nade continues describing Iruki's extraordinary abilities while explaining that he can determine the exact date 40,000 years into the future in less than a minute. Moreover, if he wanted to, he could also memorize the entire value of pi. However, on the other end of the spectrum, he struggles significantly with subjects like literature. Recalling an incident from the past, the boy mentions how a teacher had once confronted Iruki during a literature exam. At that moment, the teacher, while holding up Iruki's test paper, had accused him of mocking the subject. Showing his answer, the teacher had pointed out that the exam was about literature, not mathematics. Furthermore, while feeling frustrated, the teacher had warned him that deep thoughts and emotions were just as important as logical reasoning. In response, Iruki had confidently argued that everything could be explained through numbers. He had then questioned how anyone could fear rational explanations, while pointing out that even emotions followed logical processes. To support his claim, he had provided an example while explaining that the expression turning red with rage was not poetic, but rather a chemical reaction. He had further detailed how stress hormones and the autonomic nervous system could lose balance while causing blood pressure to rise and pulse to become irregular. As a result, the dilation or constriction of blood vessels would make a person's face appear red or blue. Upon hearing this, the teacher had furiously ordered him to leave the classroom, while declaring that he had failed the exam and would not receive a single point. Meanwhile, listening to the story, Shirone feels deeply impressed. As he reflects, he realizes how strongly Iruki stands by his beliefs, while finding it hard to believe that someone his own age could be so confident. At the same time, Nade shares that, in the past, professors had once competed to become Iruki's head teacher. However, over time they had all given up. Surprised by Shirone's curiosity, the boy remarks that he hadn't expected him to show interest in anyone. Nevertheless, he adds that he is happy Shirone brought it up. In response, our guy admits that he simply couldn't help it. However, he also notes that there is now nothing Nade doesn't know about people. A girl approaches the group and politely asks if our boy would be interested in joining their research club. She explains that they study magic that moves physical substances and believe their progress would improve significantly with someone as skilled in proton magic. Furthermore, she mentions that if they submit a research paper, they can skip the performance assessment during vacation and study together instead. However, our boy apologizes and declines while explaining that he still struggles with his grades and wants to focus on improving them first. In response, the girl appreciates his honesty and acknowledges that there is no problem. She encourages him to reconsider in the future while assuring him that he is always welcome to join. After he thanks her, she leaves with the other girls. Watching the interaction, Nade tells our hero that it is a shame, as their club is one of the best. However, he assumes Shirone wouldn't have been tempted to join anyway. Curious, Shirone asks what he means. Our boy then admits that he too lacks a strong foundation in knowledge. Since it is already difficult for him to improve his grades, he can't even dream of joining a club. Feeling envious, he expresses his frustration. Meanwhile, our dude turns to Nade and asks if he is in a club while noting that he seems like someone who would fit into a good one. In response, Nade reveals that he does belong to a club and even serves as the club leader. However, he quickly clarifies that it is not a large-scale organization. In fact, he finds it embarrassing because they lost their research funding due to having only 2 members. He further explains that he became the leader only because all the previous members graduated. Hearing this, our boy becomes curious. He realizes that since seniors were once in the club, it must have been involved in something important. He then asks if he can visit the club. However, Nade reminds him that he initially seemed uninterested in going to club. In response, our guy insists that he does want to visit, though he worries about being more of a burden than a help. Reassuring him, Nade explains that a club is not a business, but rather a place where students study and have fun together. Soon after, he leads Shirone to the club room while pointing it out as they arrive. Our boy, while noticing the location, immediately questions it. Smiling, Nade explains that they call it Istus, which is the magic warehouse. He further elaborates that the school stores all of its training materials there. Moreover, he adds that the facility is state-of-the-art, capable of retrieving any material from its storage blocks and delivering it to the entrance. Hearing this, Shirone expresses his surprise while admitting that it truly looks like a warehouse. However, Nade tells him to wait until they step inside while promising that it looks even more amazing from within. He confidently states that generations of students have treated the place like a treasure. Intrigued, Shirone asks if he should look forward to it. In response, Nade enthusiastically agrees, as he assures him that what he is about to see will be shocking for him. As they step inside, Nade mentions that this place is like a treasure passed down by senior students for generations. He explains that many other clubs desperately want it while leading to numerous conflicts. Shirone questions whether having full access to everything there goes against school rules. Nade reveals that the space constantly changes structure whenever someone searches for something while making it impossible for others to find. He calls it a perfect hideout. After walking further, Nade stops and announces that they have arrived at the Paranormal Science Club. He excitedly shares that the club explores ghosts, spirits, the afterlife, aliens, hell, God, and more. Shirone, while feeling overwhelmed, starts doubting if coming was a good idea. He admits having some interest but finds it excessive. Suddenly, a loud blast echoes through the room. Confused, he asks about the noise. Nade casually explains that the place is full of dust and reassures him that he will get used to it. Our boy, unimpressed, questions why they tolerate the mess instead of cleaning it. Just then, he notices Iruki and reacts with shock. Nade clears up his confusion while revealing that the club has a bad reputation, so its members prefer to stay anonymous. When asked if Iruki is interested in paranormal activities, Nade clarifies that he joined to disprove everything while believing that logic explains all phenomena. Iruki, upon seeing our dude, expresses surprise at his presence. He welcomes him and quickly dives into a discussion while asking if he agrees that atoms remain even after dividing matter. He then points out that atoms themselves can be split and asks if our boy knows what happens next. Our guy, taken aback by the sudden shift to theory, admits uncertainty but guesses that atoms store great energy. Iruki, impressed, confirms the answer and praises his reasoning. Shirone, surprised that he is correct, listens as Iruki elaborates. He explains that atoms hold enough energy to destroy an entire city, and then asks what happens in such a scenario. Shirone, while thinking of the consequences, responds that people would get hurt. However, Iruki dismisses the concern and insists that the only thing that matters is the immense energy itself. Our boy tries to confirm if he understands correctly while mentioning that, according to the headmaster, mages always consider the effects of their magic on the world. However, Iruki questions whether satisfying intellectual curiosity is truly worth sacrificing lives while calling him dull. He then argues that mages do not limit themselves by choice, but rather because they lack the necessary knowledge. Furthermore, he insists that intelligence is meant to be used. In response, Shirone firmly states that if being a genius means harming others, then he would much rather remain ignorant. However, Iruki immediately counters while arguing that history has always been led by a few geniuses while the masses remain ignorant, and there is no exception. Moreover, he admits that nothing frustrates him more than idealism. Our hero, while unwilling to back down, disagrees and asserts that the logic of Iruki is clouded by defeatism. He argues that an ideal is not just a dream and it can be realized. Meanwhile, Nade, who has been listening, expresses his love for debates. However, Iruki quickly dismisses emotional arguments and suggests that they should all calm down, sit, and try again. Instead of engaging further, Shirone decides to leave while saying that he has nothing more to say. As he walks away, Nade quickly reminds him that he does not even know the way out. At that moment, Iruki, in a mocking tone, suggests that he should simply retrace his steps. He adds that if he cannot manage even that, then he must truly be clueless. Annoyed by this, Nade scolds him while pointing out that he could have explained his point in a much better way. At first, Iruki brushes it off while admitting that he got carried away. He then justifies his reaction by claiming that our boy is his rival. Surprised, Nade questions why he suddenly cares about rivals when, until now, he has only valued numbers. However, Iruki explains that it is precisely because he knows only numbers. As he continues, he brings up our boy's teleportation test while asking if Nade remembers it. Nade nods while recalling that it was the very reason Shirone advanced to their class. Building on this, Iruki highlights that Shirone had just learned teleportation, yet he still managed to clear level 10, especially the difficult dragon maze. He estimates that Shirone's time segmentation reached nearly 1,000th of a second, which is an extraordinary feat. Hearing this, Nade is completely shocked. Iruki, amused by his reaction, laughs and describes it as the mystery of insight, which is faster than action and truer than knowledge. He points out that no conscious calculation can ever match the speed of intuition. However, he then wonders aloud what would happen if he were the one competing instead. At that moment, Nade realizes Iruki's intentions and notes that this is essentially a battle between calculation and insight. Curious, he asks if Iruki plans to challenge Shirone. Without hesitation, Iruki confirms his plan while stating that he will put our guy to the test in the upcoming speedgun challenge. The next morning, a boy reminds our guy that there are 2 weeks left until the speedgun test. Shirone immediately thinks about the importance of passing, while realizing that failing would mean losing his chance at advancement. Our boy then asks if he is looking forward to it, but our guy, distracted, asks what he means. Our boy expresses excitement while believing that Shirone always performs best under pressure and wondering what he will accomplish this time. The speedgun test, as explained, requires using active magic to hit targets and gain points. Active magic refers to spells that affect objects other than the caster. Although attacks are not necessary, participants can use healing or support magic instead. The targets are divided into different stages, and once all are hit, the next stage begins. This means that speed and accuracy are the most crucial aspects of the test. However, our hero realizes that he has not learned any active magic yet, so he asks his professor for guidance. He mentions that according to Omniscience standards, at least 60 points are needed to perform such magic. The professor acknowledges his concern but reassures him by pointing out that his chemistry grades have been improving rapidly, while indicating that he is making progress. She teaches Shirone's class, specifically Class 5. Shirone then addresses Professor Oliver while insisting that he is not teasing her, but genuinely understands her teaching methods. She notes that he always wants to improve everything at once, but also possesses specialist-level knowledge in a particular area. Curious, he asks if she is referring to photonization theory. He recalls that teleportation magic originates from this theory, while classifying it as passive magic that converts the body into photons. Because the transition happens so quickly, it does not appear passive, but he admits that he has never considered it in depth before. He also never knew that active magic could be performed using photonization theory. In response, she informs him that this method was only recently registered with the Mage Association. Shirone, intrigued, wonders how magic involving photons will appear visually. The professor then presents several books while directing him to the relevant information. As he examines them, he realizes that this will be his first experience with active magic through reading. Despite his curiosity, he questions whether this is truly the best recommendation for him. Although it will help with the test, he struggles to see its practical applications in real life. However, the professor assures him that while it may seem useless now, its potential is vast. She explains that nothing moves faster than light, and the ease of controlling it in a linear direction is a major advantage. She then brings up the Ivory Tower, known for pioneering advancements in magic, and mentions their prediction that firing photons will revolutionize communication. She adds that various photon-based techniques are already being researched in multiple fields, many of which remain unknown to the public. With continued research, she believes the field will evolve significantly by the time he graduates. After considering her words, Shirone decides that becoming familiar with this magic early on could be beneficial. He agrees to follow her advice while feeling excited about studying a type of magic that has the potential to create a completely new field. Soon after, he begins applying the magic, but something goes wrong. Frustrated, he wonders why he cannot emerge properly. A sudden thought crosses his mind, making him question whether he is still not skilled enough to perform it correctly. At the practical training ground 32, Class 5 gathers for their practice session. They focus on magical actions derived from the spirit zone, where photons emitted from the hand help in creating spells. Shirone quickly realizes that firing photons is not as easy as it seems. He begins to wonder if his difficulty stems from being a swarmer-type mage. As the students prepare, Professor Romy appears while welcoming the class and asking if they are ready to begin. The students stare in shock, immediately recognizing her as Professor Romy. Though she has changed her clothes and appearance, Shirone notices her new outfit, while the others speculate that she might have just returned from training. One student informs Shirone that Professor Romy is a renowned bishop of the Karsus order. Curious, he asks about the significance of the title. The student explains that being a bishop is a prestigious rank given to those who protect the holy relics. Furthermore, only 12 bishops exist in the world, and Professor Romy is one of them. They also wonder if she has received the title of Jonah, that is a rare honor. When he shares this with Nade, his friend becomes even more enthusiastic while expressing his admiration for Professor Romy and his desire to be on her team. Excitement spreads among the students as they anticipate both the test and the practical training. Shirone, too, feels eager to learn magic under her guidance. Professor Romy asks if the students are ready for the speed gun test. She explains that each class will have its own designated time for practice, and the students express their gratitude. Before proceeding, she emphasizes the importance of strengthening their omnipotence, which serves as the foundation for their magical abilities. Then, while making a surprising announcement, she reveals that a special guest from the senior class has joined them. The students react with shock and curiosity while wondering who it could be. She welcomes Samuel, who steps forward and greets the class. He clarifies that he has no intention of becoming a teacher, but out of respect for Professor Romy, he has agreed to help. He hopes his guidance will benefit all the students. Professor Romy then informs them that Samuel specializes in incantations, which is a fundamental skill for every mage. She urges them to pay close attention, as mastering this skill is essential for their progress. While the other students discuss Nade, he questions when they started seeing him as their opponent. Meanwhile, Samuel explains that incantations enhance the strength of magic through the power of words. He adds that it is easier to demonstrate than to explain, so he decides to show the students a tornado spell. Raising his hands, he forms a ball of energy in the air. Shirone watches in shock, instantly recalling that the headmaster had shown him a similar technique when he was younger. Suddenly, a tornado forms before them while leaving the entire class in awe. The teacher instructs them to remember the strength of the initial spell before she proceeds to enchant it. Speaking sacred words, he begins the incantation process to amplify the tornado's power. At first, the students are fascinated, but as the minutes pass, they grow impatient, wondering when the spell will finally conclude. After 3 long minutes, Samuel completes the enchantment while casting the tornado spell. A powerful gust of wind surges through the training ground, while sweeping past the students with intense force. They struggle to maintain their balance while realizing just how powerful the spell has become. Samuel reassures them that he is not doing anything extraordinary, and it is simply the power of words. He explains that merely reading an incantation is ineffective. Instead, they must recite it with deep focus, as if meditating, to unlock its true potential. He then asks the students to consider the magic within words, while emphasizing that incantations are based on this principle. However, he explains that this process is not practical for battles. To further demonstrate, he casts an ultrasonic spell. Murmuring his incantation, he summons an enormous tornado. The students watch in shock as the powerful wind engulfs the training ground. The intense gusts send them tumbling to the ground. As they struggle to regain their footing, the teacher asks if they have been paying close attention. Meanwhile, they are in awe of her power while realizing just how skilled she is. Shirone also comes to an important realization that when students graduate from the senior class, they become level 10 mages, though unofficially. Professor Romy then thanks Samuel for his demonstration. Samuel in turn acknowledges that while he is strong, Professor Romy, being a level 6 mage, is far more powerful. The students then ask if they will be practicing incantations, but Professor Romy informs them that they will focus on sequencing instead. She explains that sequencing is a technique where students count numbers while maintaining deep concentration, which strengthens omnipotence. The students are puzzled while wondering how mere counting could enhance their magical abilities. Some question why numbers in particular are significant. Professor Romy clarifies that numbers act as symbols that resonate with the spirit zone, while making them essential for this technique. To demonstrate, she prepares to enhance her own spirit zone. She begins counting in increments of 10, and in a remarkably short time, she reaches 100. The students are astonished by her speed. As she continues, her counting accelerates, and her spirit zone visibly strengthens. Soon she reaches 2400 and Shirone finds it almost unbelievable. The rapid increase in her power leaves the entire class speechless. While realizing the true potential of sequencing, he considers her speed astonishing as she rapidly counts to 10,000. Simultaneously, the diameter of her image zone expands while increasing fourfold. Observing this, she explains to the students that while incantation relies on verbal practice while sequencing is purely a mental exercise, the faster they count, the more their spirit zone improves in accuracy, size and power, while enhancing all their abilities. Our guy begins to wonder if this technique could help him control the firing of photons. The professor continues while emphasizing that strong willpower is crucial in sequencing. She also stresses that discipline and a composed personality play essential roles in strengthening the spirit zone. Then, she asks the students if they understand the concept. Meanwhile, Shirone reflects on his own counting speed while realizing that he has already reached 1000 within a minute, whereas others struggle to count quickly. He then considers whether his ability to perform complex calculations, such as those required in teleportation, might also apply to sequencing. An idea forms in his mind. If he divides numbers into groups and processes each group separately, he could count to 1000 in just 10 seconds. Determined to test his theory, he focuses his energy and attempts to fire a photon toward a tree. Suddenly, a brilliant flash of light appears. The students are stunned, unable to comprehend what just happened. They gaze in awe at the radiant display while finding it truly magnificent. The students speculate whether he has emitted a fire photon and if he is practicing for the speed gun test. They acknowledge that it moves at the speed of light while making it incredibly fast. But many consider it a waste of time to use this skill solely for that test. Meanwhile, Professor Romy reflects on her initial impression of him. While having previously thought of him as more specialized in defensive techniques, she wonders if he has successfully performed active magic. Observing his progress, she notes that he is becoming proficient in sequencing, to which he admits. She then suggests testing his abilities in the image zone. With all the students gathered, they prepare for his speed gun practice. The professor instructs him to focus on his target once he completes the sequencing. Closing his eyes, he concentrates on strengthening his spirit zone through sequencing. As he begins counting, he shifts his focus entirely to the targets. Now at level 1 of the speed gun test, he starts the challenge. A sudden flash appears from his eyes as he emits photons. The photon fire, channeled through his hands, moves with incredible precision. He quickly realizes that the photons travel at the speed of light and that the targets shatter the moment he locks onto them. With his score now at 11, he advances to level 2. While marveling at how rapidly everything is happening, the students also recognize the striking resemblance to direct invocation, as the targets continue to break instantly upon being aimed at. As Professor Romy observes, she notices how quickly he is counting while indicating his growing mastery of sequencing. The sight of his performance reminds her of information magic while reinforcing just how exceptional his abilities have become. The professor now realizes that our boy has learned significantly from the pathless bridge and has become exceptionally fast in sequencing. He continues firing photons at an incredible speed, and by the time the test ends, he has reached level 19 with a score of 342. The students erupt in cheers, astonished that he managed to achieve such a high score in just 1 minute. As excitement spreads, some students begin considering whether they should focus on photon firing as well. However, others respond that it seems to suit only Shirone. Meanwhile, our boy also finds the test exhilarating. Nade reflects on how, at first, he struggled with sequencing. Yet now, after mastering it, he managed to score 342 points in a single attempt. However, Iruki comments that the score is not particularly high, to which Nade replies that it is still impressive for a first attempt. Then, while raising his hand, Iruki asks the professor if he can try the test as well. The professor is taken aback by his request, but eventually allows him to proceed while warning him not to break anything. The students shift their attention to Iruki, eager to see how he will perform. Our dude wonders if Iruki genuinely wants to practice for the test, or if he is simply trying to impress everyone. Despite his curiosity, he watches closely. Iruki steps into the center of the ground and begins the test. To everyone's surprise, he starts using Schism for the speed gun test. The students question whether this technique will be effective since it involves hitting the targets by sight, rather than by sensing them. Our boy watches in amazement while wondering how Iruki is managing to shrink his spirit zone so precisely. Suddenly, a blast appears in the sky while mesmerizing everyone. Iruki advances to level 2 while achieving a score of 13, with 57 seconds still remaining. He continues his rapid attacks while capturing the attention of all the onlookers. As the test progresses, our dude begins to realize that Iruki might surpass his score. Watching closely, he wonders if Iruki is always this strong. However, upon closer observation, he notices something shocking: that Iruki is not using his eyes to target. Instead, he is calculating the equations for each target, an application of Schism that seems almost unbelievable to him. Our boy wonders if Iruki is applying sequencing techniques, but Nate explains that Iruki doesn't count in hundreds or thousands, and he counts in millions. Shocked by this revelation, our guy struggles to comprehend the level of skill required. As the test ends, Iruki reaches level 24 with a score of 5 on 48. The students are in awe while questioning whether he is even human with such an extraordinary ability. Professor Romy also finds his performance both impressive and original. Iruki steps forward while asking for feedback on his test. Our boy acknowledges that it was great, but Iruki finds his reaction underwhelming. He insists that using modularity is a remarkable feat and questions whether our boy isn't even curious about how he manages to count in millions. Our boy admits his curiosity but doubts whether Iruki would actually share his secret. However, Iruki dismisses the importance of knowing while explaining that knowledge alone doesn't lead to mastery. Then, he reveals that the technique isn't as difficult as it seems, and it simply involves applying logarithms to group numbers. Despite the explanation, our boy finds the logarithm technique incredibly challenging. Sequencing for him is just simple counting, while logarithms introduce an entirely new level of complexity. Iruki then asks if our dude believes he can defeat him. When Shirone responds that it's just a test, Iruki smirks while telling him not to lecture others unless he has the skills to back it up. He insists that theories mean nothing compared to practical application, and that they cannot be used to persuade anyone. Challenged by this, our boy asks if he will be proven right when he finally beats Iruki. Laughing, Iruki agrees while asserting that our boy will never be able to perform the mathematical calculations he does and will ultimately be crushed. Frustration builds within our dude, while the students eagerly watch, excited by the growing tension between them. The speed gun test follows specific rules, including scoring based on the number of targets hit within the 1-minute time limit. Each successful hit generates a new target while increasing the level. The speed of the targets also influences the level progression, but if time runs out before hitting a target, no new ones appear, ultimately reducing the participant's score. The average score of Class 5 is 400 and no one has yet reached 700. Our boy realizes that to achieve this score, he cannot miss any targets and must reach level 30 within the time limit. This means he must complete each level in just 2 seconds. Determined, he stands to begin the test. The students watch in disbelief as he rapidly destroys the targets while displaying remarkable speed and precision. They consider his performance extraordinary. As he advances, he reaches level 25 with a score of 567 before the time runs out. The students are astonished while realizing that he has increased his score by 200 points in just 1 week. With the test now over, the image zone closes, and the students cheer for him while recognizing his incredible speed and accuracy. Additionally, he has improved his ability to make 4 shots in 1 second. Then Iruki steps forward, ready for his turn. As he begins, the students notice that his spirit zone appears smaller yet faster than before. He swiftly breaks the targets while completing the test in record time. Reaching level 24, he scores 568 points by the end of the time limit. The students recognize that his score has also improved from his previous attempt while surpassing our boys by just 1 point. However, our dude remains focused on improving further and is confident that he can surpass Iruki in the next attempt. The 1-point difference is not a coincidence, as the same pattern continues the following day and repeats consistently. The students enthusiastically cheer for Iruki, who maintains his slight lead. Our boy realizes the significance of the single point that keeps Iruki ahead, while interpreting it as a message that Iruki is not even trying his best. The students continue discussing Iruki as the winner, but they are equally astonished by Shirone's rapid 600-point improvement in just 1 week. As they gather around him, they ask if he will join their club and teach them his techniques. Meanwhile, he reflects on the points Iruki can effortlessly achieve. Although he has been giving his best effort, he understands that Iruki has yet to reveal his full potential. However, Nade reassures him while reminding him that he still supports him. Since both of them are his friends, it does not matter to him who wins. Despite Nade's encouragement, our boy begins losing focus. Nade then points out how entertaining their competition is for all the spectators, with both delivering record-breaking performances. Curious, our boy asks whether any previous student has set a record before. Nade, surprised by the question, asks if he is unaware of his girlfriend's achievement. He then reveals that Amy once scored 987 points while leaving our boy utterly shocked.